Welcome to a deep dive on a topic that might be pretty personal for a lot of you out there. We're going to be looking at the impact of emotionally immature parents.
Oh, yeah.
And we're using this book as our guide.
Okay.
It's called Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Lindsay C. Gibson.
hmm
And there are some really interesting endorsements for this book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, even a historian was like, wow, this helped me understand some historical figures even better.
Wow. So it's like even centuries ago, people were dealing with these family issues.
Right.
Kind of a timeless topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the book really has a lot of great insights.
Mm-hmm.
But what I find really valuable is that it's not about blaming anyone.
Yeah.
It's more about understanding, you know.
Right, you're not reading this to feel bad about your childhood or your parents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more about understanding, like, why certain patterns keep showing up in our lives and our relationships.
Have you ever felt that disconnect with your parents? Like you're speaking totally different languages emotionally. Like they took care of, the basics, but something just felt missing.
Yeah, totally. And that's what the book refers to as emotional loneliness.
Okay.
And it can be so isolating even when you're physically with your family.
Right.
There's this one story in the book about a guy named David, and he describes it as feeling like he's floating in an ocean with no one around.
Wow.
Just imagine that being present but invisible.
It's like they're there, but not really there.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the book doesn't just describe the problem, it actually goes into what emotional immaturity is.
Right.
I have to admit, before this book, I kind of thought emotional immaturity was just like throwing tantrums.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
But it's so much more than that.
It's much more nuanced. Yeah, it's not about being a bad person or anything.
Okay.
It's more about having this pattern of behavior where someone has a really hard time managing their emotions, and they struggle to understand other people's feelings, and they just can't communicate in a mature way.
Right.
It's almost like they're kind of stuck in an earlier developmental stage.
Okay, so it's not about them being intentionally mean or anything.
Right.
It's more like they're missing some emotional tools,
Exactly.
which I feel like would make it harder to deal with.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, it's not as easy as just calling them out on their behavior,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. But the book does a good job of like giving you some signs to watch out for.
Okay.
So you can see if maybe your parent shows some signs of emotional immaturity.
Okay. Like,
Like, have you ever noticed your parent, like, overreacting to something small?
uh-huh.
Or maybe they just don't seem to get how their actions affect you emotionally?
Yeah, the lack of empathy.
Exactly.
That's a big one.
Or, like, how about when you're trying to have a conversation with them,
Mm-hmm.
and it always seems to end up being about their interests,
Oh, yeah.
you know?
You try to share something meaningful with them,
Yeah.
and they're just waiting for their turn to talk again.
Exactly. It's like their emotional antenna isn't quite tuned in to you.
Right.
So the book talks about 4 main types of emotionally immature parents. There's the emotional parent, the driven parent, the passive parent, and the rejecting parent.
Okay, let's choose a couple that might resonate with our listener today,
Okay?
based on, what you've learned about them.
Okay.
Because remember, this deep dive is just for you.
Oh, that's right.
We want to make sure that you're getting the most useful information.
Well, based on what you've been sharing, I think the emotional and the passive types might be really helpful to unpack.
Okay,
Those can be confusing to navigate.
perfect. Let's start with the emotional type,
Okay.
because they sound like they could be a lot to handle.
Yeah.
The book gave this example of Brittany and her mom, Shonda.
Uh-huh.
What was their dynamic like?
So Brittany's mom, Shonda, she would use these emotional outbursts like all the time.
Really?
Yeah, to get her way.
Oh, wow.
It was like walking on eggshells around her. You never knew what would set her off.
Yeah.
The book actually calls it using emotions as a weapon,
Wow.
which can be so draining for the child.
I bet that gave Brittany a ton of anxiety. Always waiting for the next emotional explosion.
Absolutely.
Now on the complete other end of the spectrum, we have the passive parent.
Yeah.
And the book talks about Molly's relationship with her father to show what this type looks like. So he was a nice guy, but emotionally just not there.
Yeah.
And he often left Molly to deal with her mom's and sister's negativity on her own.
Why?
It's heartbreaking.
It is.
Like they're physically present but emotionally absent,
Right.
which leaves this huge gap in the child's life.
Yeah.
It seems like both of these types, even though they're so different,
Yeah.
can create that same sense of loneliness and unmet needs for the kid.
Exactly. It's not about them trying to be mean. It's about the impact that their actions have.
Right.
So the main thing to remember here is that recognizing these patterns,
Yeah.
it's not about blaming your parents.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about understanding how those dynamics have affected you and your experiences.
And that's where things start to get really interesting.
Yeah,
Because once you understand the patterns, you can start to break free.
exactly. You can start to reclaim your power and build healthier relationships.
But before we dive into solutions,
Okay.
let's look at one more really important idea from the book.
Okay.
It's something called healing fantasies.
Interesting.
Have you ever found yourself daydreaming
Mm-hmm.
about how things could be different with your parent?
Huh?
Like if you just said or did the right thing,
Right.
they would magically turn into the parent you've always wanted.
Oh, yeah, the if-only trap.
Right.
Those healing fantasies, they're so common.
Yeah.
But they can keep us stuck in these unhealthy patterns.
Let's dig into those a little more after a quick break. So we were talking about healing fantasies.
Right.
That tempting idea that we can somehow change our parents
Yeah.
into the emotionally mature people we wish they were.
It's a trap that a lot of us fall into,
Yeah.
especially if we've experienced emotional neglect or inconsistency from our parents.
Mm-hmm.
We hold on to this hope that if we just do the right thing or say the right thing,
Right.
that everything will just fall into place
Uh-huh.
and we'll finally get that love and acceptance that we've always wanted.
It's almost like we're trying to make a deal with ourselves.
Yeah.
Like if I'm good enough or patient enough,
Right.
understanding enough,
Yeah.
then maybe they'll finally see me and love me the way I need to be loved.
Exactly. And the book really emphasizes how sneaky these fantasies can be
Okay.
because they keep us focused on trying to change the other person
Right.
instead of giving ourselves the power to change.
We're putting all this energy into something we can't actually control
Exactly.
and hoping for a result that might never happen.
Yeah, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
And that's where the idea of role selves comes in.
Right.
These are those personas we take on to
Yeah.
try and win our parents' love and approval.
Like the people pleaser.
Yes.
Or the overachiever.
Constantly trying to fit into this mold
Yeah.
that we think will make our parents happy.
It's like we're sacrificing who we truly are
Mm-hmm.
to try and become what they want us to be.
And I guess these roles can be helpful when we're kids,
Oh, definitely.
to cope with an unpredictable environment.
Yeah, it's a way to survive.
But they can become so ingrained
Absolutely.
that we lose touch with our true selves.
Right.
So it's like we're trading our authenticity
Yeah.
for a chance at connection.
But it ends up leaving you feeling even more empty.
Right. So how do we break free from these patterns?
Oh, that's a good question.
How do we let go of the fantasy
Hmm.
and step into our own power?
Well, the book suggests a really powerful shift in perspective.
Okay.
Instead of trying to change our parents,
Yeah.
it encourages us to focus on building healthier relationships
Okay.
with emotionally mature people.
So it's like shifting our energy from a dead end
Exactly.
to a wide open road.
There's so much more potential for growth and happiness
Yeah.
when you surround yourself with people who can truly meet your needs.
But finding those emotionally mature people
It can feel like trying to find a needle in a haystack,
can be tough.
especially if we've been conditioned to accept less than we deserve.
Right. But the book gives us a roadmap
Okay.
by highlighting the green flags.
Okay, what are those green flags?
Well, one of the biggest ones is respect for boundaries.
Okay.
Emotionally mature people, they understand that healthy relationships mean respecting each other's limits, both physical and emotional.
So they're not trying to control you
Right.
or manipulate you,
Exactly.
guilt you into doing things you don't want to do.
It's like they have this radar
Yeah.
that senses your comfort level,
Right.
and they respect your space.
Even if it means they don't get what they want.
Exactly.
It's such a change from those people who just bulldoze over your boundaries
Oh, yeah.
without a second thought.
And this respect for boundaries, it goes both ways.
Okay.
Emotionally mature people have healthy boundaries for themselves, too.
Right. So they're not afraid to say no
Exactly.
to protect their own time and energy. Yeah. They prioritize their own well-being.
And that makes them even more attractive
Yeah.
as a partner or a friend because it shows they have self-respect,
Absolutely.
which is so important for a healthy relationship.
Another green flag is reciprocity.
Okay.
They get that relationships are a two-way street.
Mhm.
They're willing to contribute their fair share.
Right.
And they don't expect you to always be the one carrying the emotional load.
So it's not all one-sided,
Yeah.
where one person is constantly giving and the other is just passively taking.
It's a give and take
Yeah.
where both people feel seen and heard.
Speaking of feeling seen and heard,
Yeah.
empathy is another big one.
Oh, huge.
These people are tuned into your emotions?
They genuinely care about how you feel
Yeah.
and what you think.
Even if they don't agree with you,
Exactly.
they're the ones who will just listen without judging,
Yeah.
offer a shoulder to cry on, without giving unsolicited advice.
They really try to understand your experience, even if it's different from their own.
It's like they have this emotional GPS
I love that.
guiding them towards your needs,
Yeah.
and they respond with compassion and understanding.
Even when things are tough.
Now, on the flip side of empathy,
Yeah.
we have another green flag,
Okay.
a willingness to self-reflect
Mm-hmm.
and change. So they're not just good at understanding other people's emotions.
Right.
They're also aware of their own
Yeah.
and willing to own up when they make a mistake.
No blame shifting.
Right.
No defensiveness.
They get that nobody's perfect
Exactly.
and that we're all constantly learning and growing.
They're open to feedback,
Yeah.
even when it's hard to hear.
And they're willing to put in the work.
Yeah, to become better.
So they see relationships as a chance to grow together,
Absolutely.
not a battle to see who's right or wrong.
It's a totally different mindset.
It really is.
And that willingness to learn and grow,
Mm-hmm.
it creates a sense of safety and trust in the relationship.
Because you know they're committed to doing their part.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got respect for boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
reciprocity, empathy,
Yeah.
and willingness to self-reflect and change.
Those are big ones.
Any other green flags we should be looking for?
Oh, there are a few more.
Okay.
Emotionally mature people, they're really good at managing their emotions.
Oh, so no more walking on eggshells.
Exactly.
Wondering what's going to set them off.
They stay calm even when things are stressful.
It's like they have this internal thermostat
Yeah,
that keeps their emotions in check
I like that.
and prevents them from burning everyone around them.
That's a great way to put it.
And last but not least,
Yeah.
emotionally mature people know how to have fun.
Oh, absolutely.
They bring a sense of playfulness and humor to the relationship.
Yeah, they remind us that life isn't always so serious.
So they're not afraid to let loose,
Right.
laugh at themselves,
Yeah.
and bring some joy into everyday moments.
It's like they bring this spark of energy to the relationship
Yeah.
and make it feel fun and refreshing.
All of these green flags sound amazing,
They are.
but finding all of them in one person
Yeah.
seems a little unrealistic.
Well, it's important to remember that emotional maturity is a spectrum.
Okay.
It's not like you either have it or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's perfect,
Right.
and we're all learning and growing all the time.
So it's more about being aware of these qualities
Yeah,
and prioritizing them in our relationships.
exactly. It's not about finding this perfect person.
Right.
It's about recognizing the people who are working on themselves
Yeah.
and who bring these qualities to the table.
And that brings us to a really interesting question.
Okay.
How does our early childhood experience,
Uh-huh.
especially with emotionally immature parents,
Right.
shape our own emotional development
Yeah.
and the way we approach relationships as adults?
That's a great question. And it's something the book explores in depth,
Okay.
using some really interesting insights from neuroscience and psychology.
So stay tuned because we're going to dive into that in the next part of our deep dive. All right, so welcome back to the last part of our deep dive into adult children of emotionally immature parents.
Okay.
We've gone through so much already, from recognizing the signs of emotional immaturity
Right.
to finding those green flags that tell us a relationship is healthier.
We've talked about those healing fantasies
Yeah.
that can keep us stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And we've started to think about how to break free from that and build relationships that really feel good.
So I'm curious about something.
Okay.
How does having emotionally immature parents, especially when we're growing up, affect how we develop emotionally
Yeah.
and how we approach relationships as adults?
Right.
Are we just destined to keep repeating the same patterns?
That's such a great question, and it's something the book really gets into.
Okay.
It uses these fascinating findings from neuroscience and psychology.
Okay.
And basically what it says is that our brains are wired for connection
Okay.
from the very beginning,
Like from when we're babies.
from the moment we're born.
Wow.
It's really a survival thing.
Okay.
We're social creatures. We depend on those connections for safety and well-being.
So it's not just about wanting to feel loved.
Right.
It's built into us.
It's in our biology.
But what if those early connections are
Yeah.
inconsistent or we experience emotional neglect?
Right.
Does that mess up the wiring?
It's not necessarily about messing up the wiring,
Okay.
but it's more about adapting to the situation. So if our early caregivers aren't really there emotionally or they're unpredictable,
Yeah.
our brains figure out ways to deal with that.
Right, like those role selves we were talking about.
Exactly.
The people pleaser, the
Yeah.
overachiever.
They're actually survival strategies
Wow.
that help us get at least some of our needs met.
In a difficult environment.
Yeah.
And those patterns, those ways of thinking and behaving.
They stick with us.
Yeah.
And they influence how we see ourselves, other people, and even the world around us.
It's like we keep taking the same path in the woods, even if it's leading us somewhere we don't want to go anymore.
Exactly.
So how do we break free from those old paths?
That's where neuroplasticity comes in.
Okay.
Our brains can change even when we're adults.
Really?
We can rewire those connections
Wow.
if we make the effort and have new experiences.
So we're not erasing the past,
Right.
but we're creating new patterns that are stronger.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin?
Well, the book has some really good advice.
Okay.
One of the most helpful things is to start noticing those voices in our heads.
You mean the inner critic?
Yes.
Oh man, mine can be so harsh.
Really?
Constantly judging me.
It's like a little saboteur.
And a lot of times those voices come from those experiences we had with our parents.
Exactly.
If they were critical or dismissive,
Or emotionally unavailable.
those messages really stick with us.
They become part of how we see ourselves.
So even though we're not living with them anymore, it's like we're still carrying them around in our heads.
In a way, yes.
So how do we quiet those critical voices?
A powerful technique is to challenge those thoughts.
Okay.
Instead of just believing them automatically.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, is this actually true? Is this thought helpful?
Right.
Where did this belief come from?
So it's like we're putting those thoughts on trial
Exactly.
and seeing if they hold up.
And as we start to separate ourselves from those old messages,
Yeah.
we can build a more compassionate relationship with ourselves.
Self-compassion.
Yes.
That's so important.
It's like treating yourself with the same kindness
Yeah.
that you would offer a close friend.
But how does having self-compassion help us build better relationships with others?
When we can support ourselves internally, we're less likely to look for that support from other people.
Right, especially from those who can't give it to us. As we start to make better choices,
Yeah.
we're not as willing to settle for relationships that drain us.
Or make us feel bad about ourselves.
It's like we're raising our standards.
And that can be so empowering
It is.
because we're not acting out of neediness or desperation anymore.
Yeah.
We're coming from a place of wholeness and authenticity.
It's like we're finally in control of our own emotional well-being,
Exactly.
making choices that align with what we truly want.
That's the goal.
But what about those times when we slip back into old patterns? Like, what if we find ourselves people-pleasing again?
Right.
Or reacting in ways we thought we'd moved past?
It's important to remember that healing takes time.
Okay.
It's not a straight line. There will be bumps in the road.
Yeah.
Times when those old ways of thinking try to creep back in.
It's like learning to ride a bike.
Yes.
We might fall a few
You
times,
might wobble.
but we keep practicing.
Right.
And eventually we find our balance.
Exactly. And as we get better at understanding our emotions, we can start building those healthier relationship habits.
It's like setting boundaries,
Yeah.
communicating our needs.
And prioritizing mutual respect.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
It really has.
We've learned so much about emotional immaturity.
And how to break free from those patterns.
It's been amazing to share this journey with you.
And I hope it's given our listeners some hope
Yeah.
and a sense of possibility.
For those who are ready to let go of the past,
And create a better future.
filled with more authentic and fulfilling relationships.
That's what it's all about.
And remember, this all starts with you.
Yes.
Embrace your own growth.
Yeah.
Be kind to yourself and never underestimate your power to create positive change.
Keep learning. Keep growing.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.